Hello, it's Julia.
And Bobby.
And we're back with another video. Today we're talking about protein. It's going to be the highest number on the bag when you look at the ingredient list on a bag of pet food.
Hopefully.
Yeah, well, yeah, hopefully. It should be the highest number on the bag. And a lot of people talk about it. It is the basic building block of life, and it has like so many different functions. But I want to first talk about what a protein actually is and what it's made up of. So, dogs and cats are a little bit different than humans. So, proteins are made up of amino acids, which are like the building blocks. So, dogs and cats are a little bit different than humans. We have a different number of amino acids that are essential. So dogs need 10, cats need 11 because of the taurine. Some dogs can't make as much taurine, so they need a little bit added to their food.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit in our DCM video.
And then there's a bunch of non-essentials. So the non-essential amino acids are the ones that the body can make themselves. Humans have only 9 that are essential, and we can make the rest. So this is one of the reasons why dogs and cats actually need more protein than people, is because they have more essential amino acids, but they also need like more total, like the number, like percentage.
They also get more energy from the protein, whereas we get more energy from the carbs.
Yeah, so actually I'll touch on that now because we mentioned it. So another reason that, pets are different than people are that we actually have different enzymes, and enzymes are actually made of proteins too. But yeah, we actually make more enzymes to digest carbs, and they make more enzymes to digest proteins. So, because they have a more acidic stomach, so that is another reason why they use proteins for energy, because they can actually break them down easier than people. And that's why it's a lot easier for a human to be a vegetarian versus a dog or a cat.
Yeah, cat is essentially impossible. There's like one loophole that doesn't really exist, but theoretically could. But
Yeah. All right.
In dogs, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, I never recommend making a dog vegetarian at all.
Basically, you'd have to feed them like 3 times as much.
So the main thing that people know proteins for are structural. So that's what makes up your muscles. Your muscles actually recycle amino acids, and that's part of the reason why you need a constant intake. Even though people use mostly carbs and fats as energy, you still need proteins to replace all the amino acids that are kind of dying in your muscles. Another thing that they do is enzymes. So enzymes are the things that break down the proteins and carbs and fats in your body. So like in your stomach and in your small intestines, and there's actually some in your saliva too. Another one is hormones. So your typical like sex hormones, but also like insulin hormones. It's for regulating blood sugar. As signaling molecules, so it's between how your cells communicate with each other. Antibodies, so that's keeping your body safe. Fluid balance, that's the albumin is actually the stuff that's in your blood. Acid-base balance, so that's keeping your body, that's a correct pH. Channels and pumps, that's also kind of in muscles for when your muscles contract, and for transport functions. So again, albumin, but that's for transporting nutrients because they bind them and then let them go where they're needed in the body. So yeah, there's a lot of different functions. So you need protein, especially in cats and dogs, because they use a lot more than we do. So I wanted to go over the different kinds of proteins that you can find in pet food, because this kind of comes up in a lot of big arguments.
There's a thing in the industry called a scientific diet.
Yeah.
Basically, brands like Royal Canin and Hills consider themselves scientific, and then they try and treat everybody else like they don't use science. I call those foods selective science.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they'll do is they'll say, well, what matters is that we're 25% protein.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where we get it from.
Yeah.
But that's just not true. like proteins from different sources are different bioavailabilities, different like ratios of the different amino acids, and there's a ton of differences that make it so, if you go and you eat a bunch of salmon or a bunch of corn, it's going to give you a very different amount of protein that your body takes in.
Yeah, so for example, salmon is I think roughly like 90% digestible, whereas corn is about 60. So yeah, you're taking in a different amount of nutrients.
Kind of a fun fact though, egg is 100% digestible.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
So this is just kind of giving you an example of the different kinds of proteins. So foods that we like and would recommend are foods that are high in like fish and actual like meat, like chicken and beef and pork and even eggs, because they're a good source of protein as well. Or peas and lentils and beans. They are a really good option for the starch component.
Yeah, I don't want them to be a major protein component because they're not as well balanced as most meats.
Mm-hmm.
But even some meats, especially red meats, aren't as balanced, and so you want something that can offset that imbalance.
Yeah, not every meat is equal. Chicken is actually like extremely good. It has a lot of like a good amino acid Chicken is actually a really good protein because it has a really good amino acid profile. So yeah, it provides all the amino acids they need, whereas beef is a little bit more lacking. So it needs a little help.
Probably why chicken not only is a staple of our diets, but if you look at pet food,
it's the most common flavor.
It's the standard.
Yeah. So things that you might want to avoid that aren't as balanced as far as protein, but a lot of the scientific diets or just the lower quality brands like that you'll find in grocery stores and things like that. They use like wheat and corn and rice. Soy is a big one. Yeah.
So for example, corn is roughly 40% digestible.
Mm-hmm. So I mentioned the amino acid profiles. So to give you an idea, when I was talking about the amino acids, you need them all for building your body and their proteins. The amino acid profile for chicken is 129. So 100 means that they have all the amino acids that are necessary. So 129 is really good because it's over 100. Now if you look at corn, it has an amino acid score of only 83, which means that it's missing some things.
Yeah, so typically what a pet food will do is they'll add what's missing in a synthetic form.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can kind of catch a food stabbing itself in the back if you know what you're talking about, because they might advertise, oh, well, we add this amino acid, and if you know what you're talking about, you go, well, why?
Yeah, you shouldn't be needing to add that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit disturbing. But even getting back to like the taurine thing, if a food needs to add taurine, that's not a good thing because that means it doesn't have enough meat in it.
Yeah.
All right. And I want to touch base on, typical protein levels found in pet food. So this is the minimum amount that you should see on like a bag of
Yeah, these
pet
are
food.
the AAFCO guidelines.
Yeah.
So this is what you have to follow being sold in America.
Yeah.
Canada doesn't have any guidelines, which is a little disturbing.
Yeah, so our pet food companies just use AAFCO.
Yeah. Most companies sell in multiple countries, and so you'll find that they either have to be up to an American or European standard or something like that.
So in dogs, for growth and reproduction, the minimum protein should be 22.5, and for adult maintenance, it should be 18. Now, personally, if I see a bag that has 18% protein, I'm like, wow, there's like no meat in this.
Yeah. I typically want more in the like 25 to 35 kind of range. I was just going to say
25 to 30 at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the most Valens has about 30% protein. That's our most popular food that we sell at our store.
The problem is that some foods like you can't really base everything off of the percentage, because what some foods will do is, I tend to go back to the veterinary foods because those are the extreme examples, but there's a high protein veterinary diet where the first ingredient is corn gluten meal. And so what that is them isolating the protein and then putting it in on its own. So they've gotten rid of the fat and the carbs, and they're only adding in the protein. So that can kind of really throw you off. You might look at it and say, oh my god, this food's 50% protein. It must be full of meat. But if they're adding it in directly instead of in like a whole ingredient form, that can really confuse things.
Yeah, but a lot of companies do it like adding specific proteins like pea protein or, you know, just isolating the protein.
It's not the end of the world if they do it in like a minor way. If it's, ingredient 10 or 15 or something like that, that's not a big deal. If it's number 2 or 1 or something crazy like that, then you know that they're just fudging numbers.
But this is actually why brands like a Canada Origin advertise how much of their protein comes from meat, so that you know exactly like that their food is high meat content. Because if they're like, oh well, 70% of our protein comes from meat, then you're like, wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So the biggest thing to take away as far as like plant-based versus meat-based proteins would just be, if you're eating 30% protein from fish and 30% protein from corn, then their body is intaking roughly 27% from the fish, and from the corn they're gonna get about 13%, 12%, something like that. So they're actually getting like half as much protein. And on top of that, that protein then has to go somewhere. It's not being absorbed by the body, so it has to be filtered out through the system. And protein that isn't digested turns into nitrogen, and so that turns into gas. So if you find that your dog is having a lot of smelly farts, then that can be linked to...
Yeah, they might just be eating too much protein.
Yeah, they can either have too much protein or too poor a quality of protein.
Yeah. Another thing you need to consider is that, like, we keep talking about, like, higher protein is like good, but it really depends on the dog. It depends on the quality of the protein, like Bobby said. But if you have, like, for example, if you're feeding a food that's like really low quality, but it has a high amount of protein, that actually puts a lot of stress on their kidneys, because the proteins will be like super processed, and it'll be harder on their bodies to actually break them down, and they'll get kind of caught in the kidneys, and that's part of the reason why they get crystals.
Yeah. Allergies are also caused by proteins. So the more processed a protein is, the more likely it is to cause an allergy. So once again, a reason to use real proteins instead of bastardized ones that have been processed like crazy.
Yeah, basically the more you process it, the less the body recognizes it as a food item. So
yeah.
Yeah, anything else you want to
add? I think that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, I hope you learned some things about protein then. Thank you.
Bye.